Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Carrie, and I am so excited for this live stream. I'm hoping that my power doesn't go out because we are having a storm here in Florida right now. So if by chance that happens, then I will have to redo this. But anyhow, if you are joining live, say hello. I should be able to see it somewhere on screen here. If you are watching the replay, then just let me know by telling me in the comments that you're watching the replay. I'm going to see if I can pull this up on my phone as well. So, okay, what are we talking about? We are going to discuss how mastering your nervous system will actually improve your relationships and your emotional well-being. Now, I know that no one is walking around saying I need to master my nervous system so that I can have better relationships, but I want to tell you that the practice of nervous system regulation is one of the most wildly misunderstood and underutilized practices when it comes to our psychological health, our emotional health, our well being, and our relationships. And so I am going to be doing a series with this because there's just too much information to pack into one live stream. And I'd really like to have them be about 20 minutes long so that you just get this bite sized piece that you can then start to work with. But I do have to lay the groundwork for just nervous system in general so that you can understand the context. Okay, so when we're thinking about nervous system practice, context is everything. And you'll see that actually as we go through some of the experiences, the context to which we get triggered is also everything. So a little bit about me and why I really love this practice and could talk about it all day long. I'm a psychotherapist. I've been in practice for 25 years, and I've worked with women, men, and couples over the course of that career. And so post-COVID, I moved my practice online and then expanded globally into the coaching realm where I focus exclusively on women in marriages and also couples. And I found the practice of nervous system regulation about, maybe like 10 years ago. I started really, really using it myself. And it came out of my need as a mom who was feeling very dysregulated myself as a mother, as a wife, as a working woman who was running her business and not being the kind of mother that I wanted to be with my dysregulated responses when I would come home. And so I had to find a way to really manage my own triggers in my body. And so we're going to talk about that. And the beautiful thing about nervous system is that when you can understand it and harness it and see just the role that it plays in your everyday life, it really does put you in the driver's seat of being able to manage your reactions. And I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to talk a little bit about what dysregulation looks like and what it actually is, physiologically speaking. The role that nervous system plays in our relationships. And also I'm going to give you some practical strategies to start thinking about this. But really in the next few is when I'm going to actually start to break down the practice and the work, because it is a practice, it's work. It's not really just a strategy. It's such a big topic. And it is so much more than just relaxing and learning to breathe to calm yourself, which is when people say, what's your favorite nervous system regulation tool? Is say, well, okay, I like going outside and listening to the birds chirp. I listening to music, but those things can only regulate your nervous system, which I'm going to even tell you what that means when we get into this. Once your system has been trained to accept those safety responses to bring you back to safety. Otherwise, you're just in a dysregulated state. Let me put these banners on here because I spent all this time typing them out. Okay, so it's not about just relaxing and breathing. It is really about retraining and repatterning your body's response to threat and perceived threat. And your early experiences are what shaped your nervous system, and your later experience reshape your nervous system. So there was a time when I actually started graduate school in the late 90s when there was something in neuropsychology called the pruning effect. And so if we didn't get to that kid from 0 to 3, then certain things would just turn off in their brain and you could not get new pathways. What you had was what you had. You were stuck with that, which actually didn't really bode well for lots of kids who were overseas in adoption facilities and things like that, or kids in foster care. So the beauty now with neuroplasticity and bioplasticity, which is what we think of in the body, neuroplasticity, the new patterns up here, bioplasticity really in our body, is that we can repattern. And so that's what's such a beautiful thing about this. And this is really going to be about learning how to map your triggers and your unsafety in your body when you get triggered by someone. And when you react defensively, that's your body's response to feeling unsafe. So you come home, you're exhausted, you've had a long day, and your husband's like, "What's for dinner?" And you just like blow your top. And he's like, "Okay." Like, you're triggered. That's a trigger. You are, sitting there in the morning, you got up 20 minutes early, you're enjoying your cup of coffee, just so calm, just savoring it. That's what I like to do. Or your tea. And your kid gets up early and they're just screaming and crying. And then physiologically, you start to rise in your body. Okay, so you're being triggered. Your body is responding. So we're going to talk about a lot of this. So when you know what your patterns are, and when you know what your partner's patterns are, you can actually use self and co-regulation to come back into safety. And, just a sort of a word about what works for some, what works for others, that your nervous system is as unique to you as your fingerprint. So what works for others doesn't necessarily work for me. And what sets other people off doesn't work for me. And, we'll talk about the window of tolerance. Everybody's is different. So you might see people doing cold plunges to heal their nervous system. And what they're doing actually is they are methodically stretching their nervous system capacity to handle stress. So I want you to think Goldilocks. So what we're doing is we're adding more stress to the system in a methodical way to stretch its capacity to handle stress. Now, that is how we repattern the nervous system. The good news is that there's a lot of ways to do that. You don't have to do cold plunges. I don't do cold plunges. I'm not a big cold plunge person. But the cold plunges also strengthen the vagus nerve, which is instrumental in regulating your nervous system. Okay, so the other thing is people with anxiety. Okay. So, anxiety, look, as a clinician, we talk about anxiety and depression a lot, which is always thought of as a disorder of the mind, of your thinking. Your brain is playing tricks on you. But the reality is that this is physiological. And so the response is starting in your body and it goes up to your mind. Because 80% of the communication that's going on inside of us is coming from the body and it's moving up to the top, to the brain. Only 20% starts up here, which is really why talk therapy is limited. And so what we want to be able to do is regain homeostasis in our system by creating useful stresses that challenge your body and your mind. Okay, so this way you can expand your capacity for stress, but you've got to do that in a very methodical way because, again, Goldilocks. Too much and it overwhelms the system and you go into full on sympathetic activation and then shutdown, and too little and then your capacity to handle stress in the future stays very tiny and you're not going to be very resilient. So when it comes to nervous system, what we really want is to be able to widen our capacity for stress, healthy stress, and build a adaptable, resilient system so that when we are stressed, we could come back to equilibrium or homeostasis. And I'll talk about what that is. So, okay, let me talk about the autonomic nervous system. Again, I don't want to get too sciencey, but I have to talk about it. So I'm going to give you like a very basic overview of that. So if we think about the autonomic nervous system, it regulates breathing, blood pressure, things that are out of our conscious control. But it is also managing risk and seeking out safety. Before the brain makes meaning out of something happening, like something that looks dangerous, your autonomic nervous system has already assessed the environment and initiated a response. So if you have a worried thought about something, it's because your body already felt it and initiated a survival response. Could be a minor one, but still a survival response. So what I'm saying to you is that perception, what we perceive, comes after what's called neuroception, which is our body's it's happening below the conscious level. So it's happening in subconscious, scanning the environment for danger, safety. And it's like putting everything into categories. Is that okay? Is that not okay? Is that okay? And then it sends a message to our brain. And that's when our brain has a thought. So neuroception precedes perception. Now, here's another little nugget. The story you tell yourself follows the state that your body is in. Okay, so all the stories you tell yourself, they're coming from your nervous system state. Stories about money, the stress you get around money, the stress talking about finances, intimacy, the anticipation of it, the stress of it, the sort of recoiling response, all of those things are coming from your body. Your body is feeling it. Your nervous system is responding and reacting to it. It's sending a message up to your brain, and then your brain is making meaning out of it. So the practice of nervous system is not just about a tool to go and like relax, like listening to music. It is a process of restoring by recognizing or naming the state, by respecting the body's adaptive response because it's doing its job to try to keep you safe, even if it's not conducive to the situation you're in. And then by either self or co-regulating back into safety, and then restoring, telling yourself a different story. So we retrain and repattern our nervous system through this process. So if you have negative stories about money, about sex and intimacy, about work, you got to, work hard to make money, whatever your stories are, you're not going to be able to cognitively talk yourself through them, which is why I'm like, for me, affirmations and mantras, they don't hold any water for me. I might read a particular passage or something before I'm going to do something to get myself in the energy, but I'm never going to convince myself of something if it's not safe to my nervous system. So ultimately, I'm going to tie this back to how you're going to use this in your relationship, because if you're mad at your partner, you're not going to be able to talk yourself out of that. You're going to have to actually get your nervous system back to safety using a practice. So I'm just going to talk about 3 branches of the autonomic nervous system: ventral vagal, sympathetic, and dorsal vagal. So think of a ladder. I take this from one of the theories that it's called polyvagal. Think of a ladder. Top of the ladder is ventral vagal. Ventral vagal is when your social engagement system is online, you're connected, you have a sense of safety, and you are getting most of your sort of flow work done when you're in that state. Okay, go down a couple of rungs and you're at the beginning of sympathetic activation, which is the beginning of fight flight, a little bit of mobilization energy. Okay, so in a mild form, it's like all hands on deck. We have a project due at midnight, so we're working till it's done. If you go down another rung or 2, you're in full on sympathetic activation, which is fight flight mode. Adrenaline is released, and now you're in full fight flight mode. Burnout is a chronic state of being in fight flight mode. So what happens when we are in fight flight mode is the thinking brain, the frontal lobe, goes offline. We're coming from back here. And the other systems start to go somewhat dormant. Endocrine system, immune system, digestive system, reproductive system. So when people say stress wreaks havoc on your body, it's because when you're stressed, physiologically, your body's in fight flight. And when you're in fight flight, you get tunnel vision. If you're in fight flight, you're looking for survival. You don't need all those other systems. They're draining energy from the body. So 500 million years old is how old our nervous system is. Think about, the fox is being chased by a lion He doesn't need to worry about his digestive system and his reproductive system at that time. So from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense for those things to shut down. It's all hands on deck. We just got to survive right now. So for people who are in a chronic state of fight flight, those systems are going to shut down, which is why people start to get sick more, which is also another reason, among many other reasons, but why people have difficulty with reproduction. We think endocrine system is all off, like hormones are all off, skin rashes, all the things. Okay, so that's sympathetic, full on sympathetic. Now what happens is, if you don't bring yourself back up to the top of the ladder, because we move predictably through the ladder up and down. And I just want to preface with, all these states are normal and should be occurring. Like, it's normal. Like, if something is stressful, we should go in fight flight mode, right? One of your kids gets hurt and you're like, you're like in fight. I would be in fight flight mode. My husband actually is very calm, but so it's normal. So full on fight flight, you got to bring yourself back up to the top of the ladder by inviting ventral vagal energy in, the safety. Otherwise, you fall down into immobilization. Excuse me. And that's dorsal vagal shutdown. That can be triggered by trauma. It can be triggered by sensory overload. And it's triggered by being in fight flight for too long. And the system is like, I can't do it anymore. And so there's also a decrease in your basic physical functions, heart rate, blood pressure, temperature regulation, things like that. Now, emotionally, this can look like depression. So I've worked with lots of clients over the years, and I've certainly experienced my own depression, where that's what shutdown looks like. It is the body saying, I can't do it. I can't take it. Hopeless, slowed down. And so it's very hard for people who are depressed to mobilize themselves and move themselves out of that. And so these three branches, the ventral vagal, the sympathetic, and the dorsal vagal. So the dorsal vagal and the ventral vagal are part of the parasympathetic. And the reason why is because they both can help down regulate, whereas the fight flight, the sympathetic, is part of the sympathetic branch. Okay, so let's talk about signs of a dysregulated nervous system. So when you get stuck in sympathetic activation, fight flight, or dorsal vagal shutdown, that is an example of being dysregulated. So people use that word a lot, like, oh my gosh, I'm so dysregulated. But the reality is that it's really getting stuck in one of those states. And it has an effect on your overall health, as I've just described, and also your relationships. Because story follows state, you're going to communicate with your partner from one of those places. And what I say to all my clients is, don't have an important conversation until you're back to the top of your ladder, when the thinking brain is online, when you can access rational thinking. Because if you cannot, you will not have a successful conversation, and you will just add another fight to your list of unresolved fights that you've had. So it is imperative that you recognize where you are, what state you're in, because that your story, the narrative that you're telling yourself and your partner, is going to follow that state. And if you want to get the most out of that conversation and you want to have a successful relationship, then you want to be in ventral vagal energy. And the other reality is that minor stressors impact this. So let me give you like a quick little example. Okay, you get up in the morning, you go to bed at night, you feel really great. You're going to get your 8 hours. You get up, you missed your alarm because your alarm was like, the volume was lower. Somebody lowered the volume on your alarm. You missed it. You woke up late and you're like, you woke up stressed. So you got a little bit of mobilizing energy because you got to get moving, right? So you're not full on fight flight, but you're elevated. You're racing around the house, you grab some food, you get in the car, and then there's traffic. And you're like, now you're escalating more. And now you might be going down another rung on that ladder, and you're getting really, really upset. And then you get to the office, and now you're full on sympathetic activation. You're in fight flight. So you're fighting to get there. You're not flighting away. You're like really fighting the traffic, right? You're angry. You get there and your boss is like, the meeting, it started 10 minutes ago. And then you're like, oh, now you might actually fall down to dorsal vagal shutdown in a minor way, because now you're just like, oh my God, what did I just do? Okay, so you got to bring yourself back up. So then you get in the meeting, people are excited to see you, you share a little piece of nugget, people are smiling, and now you're starting to feel grounded, you're feeling connected, you're connecting to people, and now you're moving back up to the top of your ladder. And then something else happens and you're up and down that ladder throughout the day. Okay, that builds resilience though. So when we think about relationships, one of the things that I want you to think about is this idea of, okay, your two nervous systems are talking to each other. So you and your partner, you and your kid. Okay. And when someone has a dysregulated nervous system chronically, it can really lead to a lot of misalignment in the relationship and erode away emotional trust, emotional intimacy and trust. Because this dysregulated nervous system is actually not a safe nervous system to be around. The regulated one is safe. And if the dysregulated one is chronically dysregulated and they're always relying on the regulated one, this regulated one has a lot of expectation on them to regulate this person all the time. Now, under typical circumstances, what happens is this one's dysregulated, this one's regulated, this one regulates both of them, and now there's co-regulation, and now we're good. And then another time, this one's dysregulated and uses co-regulation. So we could self-regulate and we could co-regulate. And we could co-regulate because nervous systems communicate with each other. We can co-regulate with our partners. We can co-regulate with our dogs. Like, animals are really good co-regulators. You know, people always say, like, it's really great to have a pet. There's a physiological reason for that. But then we also want to be able to self-regulate. So we don't want to only rely on co-regulation, because in the absence of someone there, we need to be able to self-regulate. We come into this world as newborns with the inability to self-regulate, okay? The caregiver regulates the child, the infant, the newborn rather, through co-regulation. Feeding, holding, changing the diaper, putting them to sleep. The caregiver is the regulator, right? So then you slowly start to see, as kids, become toddlers, they start to develop some capacity for co-regulation, but you still see toddler meltdowns, okay? They still need you to regulate them. You regulate them by being a calm nervous system, a safe nervous system. That's how we offer co-regulation, meeting their needs in that way. So when we think about our relationships, our adult relationships, having another person to co-regulate with us, we are wired for connection. It is crucial, it is critical, but we also need to know how to self-regulate. So largely what I'm going to be showing you in this series is how to develop a practice for yourself and with your partner. Everything I'm teaching you could take and you can share with your partner, and you can start to learn about each other's nervous system. And I will tell you that if you really master this, I'm calling this Master Your Nervous System for Better Relationships. This is part one. It's an intro. If you really master this, you will not have to worry about triggers. You won't have to worry about like being blindsided by somebody's like wild emotional reaction that seemed like it came out of nowhere, because you and your partner will develop a capacity to co-regulate through your nervous system communication with each other. There's also a concept called autonomic safety. So when will you feel safe in the presence of another nervous system? So you can think about people who, when you're around, you're like, so I know for me, when I go to the yoga studio, doesn't matter what yoga teacher, I get there and I'm like, because they bring that energy. Now, there are some people that I interact with, they bring a more frenetic, anxious energy, and I know that about them. And so I bring my safe energy, and I am self-regulating myself so that I don't have their energy seeping into me. And then I become dysregulated. Okay. So as I'm saying, we do need to co-regulate and self-regulate. And when we have a balance between the self-soothing practices for self-regulation and support from others, that is really an all-around way to create emotional harmony or emotional balance, is self-regulation and co-regulation. And that is something my husband and I have established. And so we have a teenager now who's also neurodivergent, who is dysregulated a lot. And my husband and I have worked very intentionally on creating in ourselves safe nervous systems for each other and also for our daughter, so that when there's dysregulation present, we don't become overly dysregulated. Because when you're dysregulated, you can't parent effectively. You can't communicate effectively. You're not going to be good in a meeting. You're not going to be good having conversations. And so it really is I would say it's a very important piece of the puzzle. So the other thing that I want to talk about with this is there's 8 categories of influence when we talk about relationship alignment or autonomic nervous system alignment. And when we can align them, the more aligned they are, the deeper our connection with our partner. So we can think connection and we can think bond. Bond is more physiological, connection is more social. So babies are born bonded to their mothers because it's physiological. They spent, 40 weeks in the belly. And then you work to develop a emotional connection and a social connection after that. So when we think about using a co-regulation practice with our partners, we're deepening our connection because we are deepening the physiological bond that we have. Now, the 8 categories, let me look at my list here. So the 8 categories are where our nervous systems are influencing each other, and we're either in sync or not in sync. And it's a spectrum. So it's not a sort of a categorical. So to the degree you are in sync in each of these categories. So we've got daily activities like who's doing what, who's cooking, who's doing the prep work, who's doing the cleanup. How in sync are we and our nervous systems in that? Spirituality, that could be spiritual practice, it could be religious practice, what have you. Intimacy, how much do we like the closeness versus not like the closeness, and are we aligned in that? Physical intimacy, your sexual relationship. So we see a lot of misalignment nervous system wise, where one partner may feel really safe. So much about sexual intimacy with your partner is about feeling safe in your body, assuming that you have a partner who you trust and you feel safe with. It's about feeling safe in your body. Now, if there's one partner who feels safe in their body and one who doesn't, there's going to be a big misalignment in terms of nervous system there, and it's going to be felt. And a lot of people will talk to me about their sexual experiences, and so much of it really does go back to feeling safe in your body, whether there was a trauma there or no trauma there. Okay, let me get to my list. Okay, movement, how much you like to move, active, physical, walking, hiking, exercise, play. Do we both like to play or not? Is one more serious and the other is more playful? There's going to be a, sort of being in alignment or not. Work, how much we work, how much we value work, how ambitious we are at work, and communication. So of course, naturally, you're not going to be perfectly aligned on all of these, and nor do you need to be. Like, this is not the goal, but we need to be close enough so that we can bridge any gaps that come up. And remember, the more aligned you are, the more in sync you are, and the more connected and the more bonded you are. So what I'm going to finish off with is I'm going to give you some practical tools to start to think about, because I want you to have something as a takeaway. But what I want you to know is that what we're going to do in the next episode is I'm going to have you start mapping your nervous system, because really that is the best way to figure out. But I want you to start trying on some of these things. So think about this. It's about building a practice of regulation. So think about a rhythm of regulation, okay? We don't just want to use regulation tools when we're dysregulated. We want to use them all the time. So the practice, like true regulation, is about creating a rhythm of balance where the body learns to just keep returning to safety, top of the ladder, just keeps learning to return there. So the strategies are really about building and strengthening connections to the biological state of safety and connection. Okay, so some of those are going to be some of these things that you are already familiar with. So we've got things like deep breathing. So if we think about breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the safety. So ventral vagal and dorsal vagal. It's the down regulated. Okay. The sympathetic is fight flight, which is the upregulated. So upregulate, downregulate. So if you're upregulating, deep breathing will downregulate you. Sympathetic and parasympathetic operate like a gas pedal and a brake. They both can't be activated simultaneously. So when you do deep breathing, you're going to downregulate. Okay. Same thing with practicing mindfulness, meditating, yoga, not stress yoga, like flow yoga. But if we think about Kundalini yoga, that's mobilizing energy. That's moving energy through your body. It has a different purpose. That's going to be upregulating, actually. So there's a time we need mobilizing energy for somebody who's more in like a dorsal vagal. So I'll give you an example. If you work all day and you're like this all day long, like you just kind of have that kind of job, and then you come home and the house is like, the kids want to play and everybody's running around and you're like in this, like it's going to be very hard to transition. So what you need to do is you need to upregulate. So that might be like, that's going to be some physical movement. It's going to be some somatic exercise. It could be walking. It could be dancing. I dance. It could be shaking. I don't dance professionally, but I'll do a dance if I need to get some energy, upregulate. But if you are, so someone asked me that question, okay, how can I do this? And I say, well, what do you do all day? And, I need to know what state you're in. I need the context. What nervous system state are you in all day? Okay, I'm in a mild dorsal vagal. I'm engaged, but my mobilizing energy is low. Versus I ask someone else and they say, oh, I'm a litigator and I'm in the courtroom all day long. Okay, well, I'm not going to tell them to go have a dance party because that would just upregulate them more. I'm going to tell them to downregulate. So for them, it's going to be something like listening to a podcast, not a stressful one, reading a book, doing a 5-minute meditation, doing a few yoga poses or yoga stretches or something like that. Okay, so the other thing is that we want to create autonomic safety in life daily. As I said, you don't want to just practice these things when you need them daily. I see I'm at 32 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up. Being mindful of your environment. The environment where you spend your time in, cultivating a nice environment. Like this is my home office and I have all the things in here that I really love, things that make me feel really kind of uplifted, from the lighting to the sound, to the scents I use, to the visuals and things like that. So being mindful of your environment. My house is laid out in a way that creates that safety feeling for me. It's spacious. The colors we use are very grounding and regular. Like we were very intentional when we moved into this house about how we decorate. It's not cluttered. There's certain colors on the walls with the art, but there's also open space. And so be mindful of your environment. And also incorporating movement daily, practicing self-compassion, things like that are other ways. I'm gonna, as we move through this, I'm gonna tell you a lot more about some other regulation strategies, but we're really gonna tie them in. But what I want you to do after this is I want you to go try on some things and see how they feel. So wait for a moment when you're stressed. And when you're stressed, try on some things, try on some down-regulating things. I suggest you curate a playlist for upregulation and downregulation. Like I need energy. This is one playlist. I need to relax. This is another playlist. So just quick example. So last night I had some edgy energy yesterday. I did some work. I went down a rabbit hole. I was kind of annoyed with myself about doing that. And then I was annoyed with myself about losing 3 hours down this work rabbit hole. And so then I had this edgy energy and, I needed to burn it off. And so I walked on the treadmill and I still was feeling it. So I did a 15-minute meditation and that was it for me. Okay. There was a time in my life 10 plus years ago where I would have stayed in that for days. It was like a normal. And last night was Sunday. I used to have the Sunday scaries all the time. Okay. So this is part 1 of the series. I'm going to be putting out a series of probably 3 or 4. I'm going to go through a lot of these practices and show you how to do it. And at the end of that, I'm going to have an invitation for you, something that I'm doing specifically on how to bring this into your daily life, like very hands-on, which I'm so excited about. I'm going to be sharing with you all of kind of the experiences that I like, and you get the chance to work with me on that. It's going to be a very short experience, so if you want to dip a toe in, it will be perfect for you. And any questions, put them below. I would love to answer them. I love questions, especially when it comes to talking about this, because as you can see, I've talked about this a lot. So this is the longest one, 35 minutes. I promise I will try to keep them, 20, 25 for the future ones. It's just like I wanted to get the whole foundation laid for you so that you know what I'm talking about before I start going into, mapping and what are triggers and how do we neutralize them and where do you fall on the ladder? Because the reality is that the tool you use has to match the state your nervous system is in. It's not just a matter of like, I'll just try this tool. Like I can't just give you tools. So thank you for tuning in, whether you were live or watch the replay. Comments below, questions below. And of course, if you have anything personal you want to talk to me about, my DMs are always open. Have a lovely rest of your day, whatever day it is when you're watching this.